like to introduce you to a short text which was revealed by Pema Lingpa in Bhutan and is presented. And is presented at the beginning of his medicinal accomplishment, his Mendrup cycle, in the Dudjom edition of his collected works. It is in fact almost identical to a text revealed earlier by one of Pema Lingpa's famous predecessors, Ratna Lingpa, who similarly had a lasting impact on Bhutan's religious heritage. But for the purpose of this talk, I focus primarily on Pema Lingpa's version, which includes a few annotations not found in Ratna Lingpa's revelation. The text is a small commentary on the category of the 8 principal medicines and the 1,000 branches. Now, this classification appears to be unknown in Tibetan and Himalayan medical sources, yet it is ubiquitous in Nyingma Tantric sources. It occurs widely in the regular medicinal cordial offerings, the mensha, found in many tantric sadhanas. A classic offering formula is typically used with a verse line, medicines compounded from the 8 principal and 1,000 varieties. The 12th century ancestral forefather of the Nyingma school, Nyangral Nyima Urza, includes some discussion of this line in a commentary on tantric items within his Eightfold Buddha word, and he also gives it within recitations for his medicinal accomplishment practice. Similarly, the line is given and the Eightfold category discussed in the medicinal accomplishment section of the Eightfold Buddha word cycle of Nyangral Nyima Urza's recognized rebirth and successor, the 13th century Guru Chowon. Moreover, this class of 8 principal medicines and 1,000 branches is referred to in other early sources, including root tantric texts for the Ellicsr class of Mahāyoga, such as the Eightfold Division, the Bumpo Gyurpa. The classification is not purely a ritual category without specific content. These 8 principal medicines form some of the key ingredients to be included in sacred medicinal pills, which are compounded and consecrated in the course of a medicinal accomplishment session. So what exactly are these 8 principal medicines? How do they connect to the 1,000 varieties? And how should we understand their purpose? Pema Lingpa's short text gives us a clear outline of different levels for understanding these tantric medicines. The text structures discussion of the 8 into the standard tantric levels of outer, inner, and secret. The outer level refers to 8 natural substances considered to have medicinal qualities. Yet the opening phrase of the list, as well as the associations given for each ingredient, reference the tantric myth of the Ellicsr tree. In this origin story, medicinal substances pervaded the world thanks to the tantric deity's subjugation of the personification of evil, Rudra. When Rudra's body disintegrated, the parts were scattered throughout the universe, so the Ellicsr seeds took root and became a wish-fulfilling tree. Various versions are found in different Nyingma texts, in the hagiographies of Guru Pema, and in root tantras of the Ellicsr qualities class, Dupsi Yunten. Pema Lingpa's text refers to the 8 medicines comprising the serpent heart sandalwood tree, a term for a wish-fulfilling Ellicsr tree found in the Pema Katang. To cite that source, when Rudra was subjugated, a terrifying voice reverberated, "Your corruptions are finished, fallen into the Naga ocean abode, and the wish-fulfilling tree, the serpent heart king sandalwood, has sprouted. The roots of the tree have been planted in the Naga land, the leaves have become dense in the Asura land, the fruits are ripening in the land of the gods. The name of the tree is Ellicsr Amrita." In Pema Lingpa's text, each part of the tree is then identified with one of the 8 medicines, which are rather loosely but not systematically connected with the parts of each plant used, so that, for example, saffron is the Ellicsr tree's flowers, while nutmeg is its fruit. Moreover, several items on the list are specified in other versions of the Rudra story, although not necessarily linked to the Ellicsr tree. Sometimes different parts of Rudra's body dropped in different places, producing specific Ellicsr substances, and these may include several of Pema Lingpa's outer medicines. It is not entirely straightforward to identify all of Pema Lingpa's list, and it seems likely that at least two have been understood to refer to different substances at different times. The first of his list is the wish-fulfilling tree's roots, Mulapati, which is presumably equivalent to the Sanskrit loanwork Mulapatra, which we find explicitly in later sources. However, Pema Lingpa's text gives an annotation specifying it as white sandalwood, which is different from the understanding of Mulapatra found in some later texts, such as Terdat Lingpa's or Dujun Rinpoche's medicinal accomplishment works. Pema Lingpa's second item is the trunk, maroon sandalwood, while third, the branches are cloves, and fourth, the leaves are Gandapatra, presumably equivalent to the Sanskrit loanword Gandhabhadra, meaning good fragrance. This item also seems not to have a consistent identification. Pema Lingpa gives an annotation suggesting white gentiana. The final ingredients are straightforward. Fifth is the flowers, saffron. Sixth is the fruit, nutmeg. Seventh is the bark, cinnamon. And eighth is the sap, camphor. The next section of the text lists the 8 inner principal medicines, again linking them to the parts of the wish-fulfilling Ellicsr tree. These consist of human body parts and connect to the tantric offerings. For instance, the flowers are the 5 senses, which are one of the wrathful tantric offerings. Although they do not seem quite to line up with the specific associations in the Rudra story of the origin of Ellicsr, it seems that the list here are identified as Rudra's body parts, and there is some relationship between some of the items and the associated parts of the tree. Thus, the limbs are the branches and the skin is the bark. The text then gives 8 secret or private principal medicines, which relate to the sexual fluids and processes within the body, 4 male and 4 female, and presumably imply the potencies generated by tantric sexual practices. The next section of the text complicates the category of the 8 principal medicines, in part by explaining how they connect to the 1,000 varieties, and thus introducing further interpretations of the 8. The first explanation is that each of the 8 has 125 assistants, making a total of 1,000. But then the text explains that the 8 principal medicines can be understood in terms of 8 sets of 5 substances, which are then subdivided to create the 1,000 varieties. The first set of 5 consists of the 5 tantric elixirs, excrement, urine, rakta, human flesh and bodhicitta, while the second set are the 5 essences, which are the eyes, ears, nose, tongue and heart. The third is the 5 fruits, consisting of different groups of sentient beings, and the fourth is the 5 qualities, which are important substances also found in Tibetan and Himalayan medicine, the 3 types of myrobalan, as well as bamboo pith and cloves. The 5th and 6th sets also consist of medicinal substances which are commonly used in making tantric pills, but the 7th and 8th sets are quite different types of items. The 7th set is of the 5 roles or tasks, which are the key roles in tantric performance, such as the Vajra master and the regent. The 8th is 5 of the necessary articles for conducting a practice session, such as the Mandala and coloured sands. I'm not even sure what we've got here. Right, sorry, I missed turning over one of the slides, Mandala and coloured sands. The final section of the text discusses the various ways in which the 8 sets can be expanded to create the 1,000 varieties. I've only time for a few short reflections on this text in relation to our theme of 21st century perspectives and continuity and change. The first is that for increasing numbers of Vajrayana followers who need and expect some intellectual explanation of the Tantric Mandala categories, we have plenty here to think about. The second is that even in principle, in this system there is room for multiple understandings and layers of interpretation. The third is a little more complicated. The category of these 8 principal tantric medicines incorporate assumptions about the natural potencies of certain species of plants, which feature in the outer list of the 8 medicines, a list which is given prominence at the beginning of the text. Some of this list occur also in the other broader interpretation of the list of 8, which gives 3 sets of 5 plant-based ingredients. At the same time, what is striking is that these medicines are not simply lists of organic substances. Their potencies owe as much to their symbolic framing as to their natural qualities. The first list is conceptualized not so much according to any schema of natural attributes, but in accordance with their varied connections to the symbolism of Rudra's subjugation. Their inner and secret levels of understanding are even more clearly referencing tantric symbolism. But perhaps most interesting of all is the alternative understanding of the 8 medicines in terms of the 8 sets of 5. At the head of the list, we have a set of 5 tantric Ellicsrs, a group which is fundamental in Nyingma Mahāyoga practice, yet which would not otherwise seem to fit with the eightfold classification. The next 5 sets feature both tantric items and natural ingredients. But the final 2 sets have moved to an entirely different type of list. Instead of anything that one would normally define as medicinal, we have the roles played by the principal tantric practitioners in the ceremonies for major practice sessions, drupchen, and the tantric ritual paraphernalia required for the performance. These are items which can only be seen as medicine by the broadest possible definition of men or medicine as something beneficial. What is drawn attention to here is the necessity of placing the 8 principal medicines within the context of a major practice session or an elaborate communal ritual conducted over a number of days in which tantric medicines are compounded and consecrated. Very briefly, I would like to broach 2 subjects arising from these reflections on Pema Lingpa's text. First, there is the question of the efficacy of such tantric medicines, and here I would like to suggest that we might heed Pema Lingpa's framing, which emphasizes the tantric spiritual dimension as well as the plant-based ingredients, in a global context in which there is interest in the real psychological effects, for instance, of placebos and other manipulations of the whole body-mind complex. It may be that it is crucial to take account of the Vajrayana ritual context in understanding Tibetan and Himalayan medicinal substances, a context which has perhaps been rather neglected in some modern academic studies of Tibetan and Bhutanese medicine, which have often focused primarily on the rather more secular medical traditions of Sowa Rigpa as practiced today. Secondly, on the issue of continuity and change, it is clear that there is considerable continuity between Ratna Lingpa's and Pema Lingpa's texts and contemporary practice. Most of the themes of Pema Lingpa's text are reflected in the subsequent literature, such as the extensive commentarial manual on medicinal accomplishment rituals written by the 17th century Theravada Lingpa. He also has the 3 categories of outer, inner and secret with largely the same content. His outer list differs slightly in ordering, and 2 of the items are identified differently in the accompanying annotations, but we find the same link to the story of the origin of the Ellicsr tree. This tradition is then reflected in the medicinal accomplishment rituals of the 20th century Dujum Rinpoche, which are thriving in Bhutan today. More pictures? No, okay. On the question of their viability in the future, I've heard the sceptical comment that such elaborate, lengthy and labour-intensive rituals are not likely to find a niche in the world's ever busier modern urban environments. I am not so sure. In fact, Tantric major practice sessions, which pack a huge amount of communally generated spiritual energy into a 10-day period and open up access to the most profound levels of tantric accomplishment to practitioners who are not able to follow a full-time contemplative life, can even be seen as a short intensive course which can act as an alternative to the traditional 3-year retreat. And an annual attendance at such an event can act to recharge the batteries and reconnect with the spiritual community for those who have graduated from a monastery or tantric training college and integrated into householder life. So it may transpire that these practices have a long-term viability in Bhutan and elsewhere in the world.